Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from YourBlackWorld.com, and today one of our bloggers wrote a really interesting article about Essence Magazine and whether or not white women should be on the cover of Essence. Many of you know how I feel about Essence. I kind of feel that Essence has lost a lot of its swag. I think that the new ownership, being Time Warner, has kind of taken Essence away from its original mission. And there's that question of whether or not we even want to try to claim that magazine anymore as a space for black women and maybe turn to other forms of media or whatever the case may be. I think a lot of people have abandoned BET in that same way because they say, well, now we've got TV One and we've got all these other options, so maybe we don't need BET to be all things to all people anymore. So that relieves the pressure on BET and also relieves the pressure on the public. Well, maybe Essence Magazine's in the same space. So to talk about some of this in terms of what Essence is and whether or not white women should be on the cover of Essence in order to appeal to a broader audience, I wanted to bring in the blogger who wrote the great article about the topic, Asa Lovechild. She's on the line. How are you doing today, Asa?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing very well, and just so people know that our technology is not perfect, so Asa, if there's ever a point you can't hear my question, don't hesitate to interrupt or to tell me that you couldn't hear what I just said. So Asa, you wrote this piece, and you were first referencing some remarks or an open question by Jada Pinkett Smith about whether or not black women should be on the cover of Essence. Can you tell us about that piece and what led you to write it and what also inspired the opinions that you presented in the piece as well?
Well, definitely what inspired me to write it was Jada Pinkett Smith's question. She actually posed the question, should white women be allowed to grace the covers of black magazines? And Essence just happened to be the cover that she used as a mock-up example on her post in Facebook. I follow her. I think she's an exceptional woman who brings up a lot of challenging issues that black women don't like to face or even talk about. And so that actually sparked my interest in digging a little further into what Essence really meant to African-American women, especially from my generation who grew up with the magazine since its inception. I went a little further than what Jada initially put out there, and I asked the question, has Essence Magazine, been a guiding factor, especially now in the 21st century, for African-American women? And the conclusion that I came up with was absolutely not. I feel like Essence has turned into, instead of Essence being a magazine where African-American women can go to look at relatable topics about the issues that are going on in their lives, it's now become, they have now tried to mainstream the magazine to compete with magazines such as Glamour and Vogue, which are fashion magazines. So what you're really seeing in the magazine is you're seeing a lot more ads, a lot more fashion ads, a lot more enticing articles that will get you to buy different products. So it's become very, very commercialized in a way, to where it really just skirts over our issues that we have as black women, some issues that are different from our other counterparts, our other female counterparts. And so I felt that it was very important to address the fact that Essence has changed in that way. I mean, Essence was created specifically for African-American women because we didn't have magazines out there that looked at the issues that we were having. So I do think Essence is failing in some part. You had mentioned BET and other networks that have been bought out by predominantly Caucasian companies such as Viacom, and of course Time Warner and Time Incorporated is no exception. And it seems to be a trend with African-American owned or African-American based companies, building up this great brand that caters to African-Americans and then, making their money in money.
I agree with you. I think that it almost seems that with Essence, you're dealing with a company that is really struggling in a difficult industry. they had to sell to Time Warner, or at least some people believe they had to sell in order to survive. The magazine industry has really died, and you see that they're turning more and more to the Essence Music Festival as a profit center. And even the owners of Essence were in conflict, or previous owners who sold to Time Warner. They didn't agree on whether or not the direction of the magazine has been a good one. One of the owners said, hey, I'm glad I sold. Time Warner can do what they want to do. It's a tough industry. We had to make this decision. It made sense. I'd do it all over again. Another owner says, I don't know if I'd do it all over again. He actually wrote a statement on naturallymois.com, the same blog where you wrote your article, and he said, no, I don't like the direction Time Warner has taken the magazine. I don't think it was a good idea to sell. So I think a lot of us are confused right now about what Essence means and whether or not, or how you go about balancing between economic reality and your fundamental viewpoint on what the magazine should be. So let me ask you this question, a very direct question, Asa. Should white women be on the cover of Essence? We get black women that are on the cover of predominantly white magazines, right? So should Essence put white women on the cover, maybe 1 out of every 7 or something like that, to reflect the changing society in which we live? People think we're in a post-racial America, so maybe Essence should be post-racial. What do you think?
Well, in one aspect, I do think fair is fair. If African American women are receiving the opportunity to be a part of Glamour magazine and Vogue for their covers, then absolutely white women should be put on the cover of Essence. That's if Essence is changing its mission. If Essence is going from being strictly an African American based magazine that caters to African American women to a magazine that's going to cater to all women of all cultures. But then on the other hand, you got to raise the question, if we're putting white women on African American magazines, then what's the fate of Latino magazines? Latinos have their own magazines, African Americans have their own, and of course, Caucasians dominate a lot of the media and magazine coverage that we have. So you have to ask the question: Is it even fair, being that most of the magazines out there that we see, especially for women, are owned and cater predominantly to Caucasian women?
Well, I think that it's an interesting thing because on one hand, Essence can't really come out and say, no, we will not have white women on our cover. That kind of statement simply has a lot of connotations that would make people very uncomfortable. It would ring of something that's just clearly discriminatory. At the same time, they can say that we are a magazine for black women, by black women, assuming they want to even maintain that position. They may not want to be a magazine for black women, by black women, but I believe that if that's what you are and that's what you represent, then maybe your standard can't be the same as Vogue, because Vogue is not, Vogue doesn't say, look, we're a magazine for Caucasian women, by Caucasian women. That's not their central theme. Their central theme is fashion. So they're saying, look, anybody who is deep in the fashion world, or who is a relevant figure in this world, deserves a chance to be on the cover, and that person might be of any ethnicity. But when you're talking about black,
even pasted on, I hate to interject, but even pasted on the spine of Essence magazine, it says Essence, where black women come first. So they are really making a statement that this is an African American magazine that caters to African American women.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's now, oddly enough, we do live in a world where it would be difficult for white women to say, we want our own magazine. We want a magazine for white women, by white women, right? But but maybe that's the price you pay when you don't have the quote unquote privilege of being part of a group that has been discriminated against for the last 400 years, right? So we paid the price for 400 years for the right to come together to support a minority group that has been historically oppressed. We know, and everybody I know who has worked with Essence and other magazines in that genre, they know how hard it is still to this day to get those jobs at Vogue. That Vogue is not going to consider black women as readily as it might consider white women who are part of certain networks and things like that. So we can't sit here and pretend that a black woman gets a fair shake when she goes to these other publications. And so to know that now we're in a space where even Essence is going to boot black women around or kick them out or try to control them, I think that's kind of a scary place to be. I think what it says really, Asa, and this is me coming out as a finance professor, is that it tells us that we can't resort to pure capitalism when it comes to measuring the value of a business entity. You cannot judge an entity solely based on how much money it makes. You have to base it solely on what kind of value it brings to the world. Some of that value is financial. You got to be profitable. But some of that value, it goes beyond money. And Essence meant so many things to so many people that went beyond the financial bottom line. And I think people forget that. And Time Warner has certainly forgotten that. Absolutely. So, well, I can say that if black women want to know what black women think, they can go and read what you write, because you're a black woman. You've been a black woman for a very long time now, and you're not going to stop being a black woman, and that's why I respect you. Well, thank you so much, Asa, for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you all. This was Asa Lovechild. She writes with Naturally Moi and Your Black World. She's also a super entertaining actress and singer, and I've seen her dance, and she just does everything. She's just one of the most extraordinary performers in New York City that I've ever seen, so you got to check her out. And so thank you all for checking us out at yourblackworld.com, and until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone.